everybody, and welcome to SYD Life, a podcast all about living in Sydney and topics that can help you live a good life, positive, healthy life here in the city of Sydney. And we're joined for another conversation today with the infamous Dr. Peter Downey.
Thank you.
Welcome, sir.
Greetings and hello. Great to be with you, Mitch.
Yeah, my name's Mitch and part of the team here. And today we're talking about fatherhood, which is a great topic. We're coming up to Father's Day very soon. So we wanted to drill down and ask some questions around being a dad and doing fatherhood really well.
Yeah.
Dr. Downey obviously is a principal. He's also written a book on fatherhood, which is titled
So You're Going to Be a Dad.
Love that.
And that came out 25 years ago, and the 25th anniversary edition has just come out.
Amazing. And a newly recorded
audiobook, yes, listening to my dulcet tones read my own book.
That would be very therapeutic, no doubt. And you're also a dad of 3 adult children.
Yes, yeah, I've got I've got 3 daughters,
yep.
And one's about to turn 30 and the other in their early 30s.
Wow, amazing. Very cool. And then you've got now how many grandchildren?
I have 4 between the ages of 2. I've got 3 grandsons.
Yep.
So I've got a Walter and a Harvey and an Arthur and newly born Indiana. And they're a great joy to us because you can play with them and give them back.
How good.
Which is fantastic.
How good. I get to watch that. I have 2 kids of my own. I have a 3, almost 4-year-old daughter, redheaded, full of passion and rage and all of the things in between, and we love her dearly. Her name's Rowie. And then we have a almost 1-year-old Ren, who is the other end of the, I shouldn't say spectrum, but he's the other end of the coin. He's just all smiles and love, and it's awesome.
And it's an interesting reminder too to me. It's been 30 years since I had little kids, but now that we've got grandchildren, it's a reminder of how much work they take. How much joy and but just the constancy of looking after babies and children. I've forgotten.
Yeah.
And to be reminded of that and have our family stay with us, and just the whole routine of life and revolves around getting food ready and sleep times and making sure you've got enough nappies and and everything's quite chaotic.
It is beautiful.
I've forgotten.
Beautiful chaos.
Beautiful chaos.
It is.
Chaotic beauty.
You do kind of block it out of your mind, I guess, at a certain point when you kind of forget it existed. But it is nice to be reminded. But also nice, I imagine, to be able to hand them back at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's lovely.
Yeah, it's good. Another fun fact, just for everyone's curiosity and for my own benefit, is my own dad is actually was a primary school buddy of Dr. Downey.
That's right.
And do you have any dirt on my dad?
Yeah, but none that I could share publicly.
I imagine
without
you got
his permission.
A lot of mischief at 8 years old.
On the Year 6 camp, I believe there was some mischief to be had, but I think it's probably best if we don't dig too much into the past.
Keep it offline.
But we sat in the same classroom. We were great mates, and that just makes me feel old knowing that you're his son.
Yes.
I just realised. Oh, well, I'm a granddad, so I must be old.
Older.
You never feel old, do you? You never feel old.
No, well, I still feel 20. Then I meet 20-year-olds. I'm like, I'm not 20 anymore.
That's true.
But obviously, fatherhood's a massive topic and something that's really important. No matter what season of fatherhood, there's a whole bunch of different seasons. And new dad, dad to adults, dad to teenagers, becoming a dad, just preparing to be a dad. So many different things we could talk about, which we want to touch on. But I think what can be confusing, particularly in a generation we're in where there's so much access to information, things readily available, books, blogs, podcasts like this, it can be overwhelming when you are stepping into that space, wanting to learn more. What do I listen to? What voices are right? How do I disseminate all this information I'm getting? For you, how would you boil down the heart and the goal of being a father?
Yeah, it's you're right. We live in an information age, and there's too much information about everything. So you've got to work out your trusted sources.
Sure.
There's a book called So You're Going to Be a Dad, which actually spells everything out really clearly.
Absolutely.
A little plug. Look, I think throughout the goal of fatherhood throughout history, if you're thinking in a historical sense, we might go back to thinking about dad. There's lots of different images we might have of dad. Dad as protector.
Sure.
So in early civilization, that was almost a physical thing, a pisical protection of the family unit. I will physically protect you from dangers and threats. As society evolved, that might have been an economic, that evolved into sort of economic provision. I will be the provider of the family. And dads wear all sorts of different hats, and we live in a sophisticated society now where the roles of mums and dads have blurred somewhat. They're not quite as clear-cut or divided as they perhaps once were. So mums are also protectors and providers and those kinds of things, and also teachers. And for those, I'm a Christian guy, and I'm always as I raised our children, I was always aware of that lovely verse from Proverbs, which talks about teaching children in the way they should go. It's your role to what that's actually talking about is exposing them to society,
right.
And helping them to be confident and to flourish and to grow. And part of that for me was involved growing them, helping them grow up in a godly way and to know God. That's not the case for everybody, but you want your children to be confident and to be able to flourish. And in some respects, one of the biggest roles of fatherhood is redundancy. You are actually working on being redundant.
Wow.
Because when you have these babies that we have, or toddlers, they're totally dependent. They can't feed themselves. They can't dress themselves. They don't know anything about the world. They don't understand money or travel or relationships. Nothing. They're totally dependent on you to do everything. But you have to look forward to a future era in their life and a season where that's totally switched and they are independent from you.
Yeah.
So moving from total dependence to independence. So helping them navigate that space as they go through their formative childhood and teenage years. You are working on being redundant and them ultimately leaving you and going and be able to exist as a flourishing human being in the world.
Yeah, that's great. Now, I find it interesting you mentioned the blur that sometimes can happen in our, in this day and age between mothers and fathers, and obviously there's a whole bunch of different outworkings of that. But obviously I think it's really important for us to still value the role of father. And I think that, we got to not lose that value. What do you think a father brings, not just on a physical level, like you said, protection, provision, but even on a fundamental human development level? What can a father bring, and why is a father so valuable?
Yeah, look, it's an interesting question because obviously there are lots of families that are single-parent families that might not have a father.
Sure.
And that's not to say that this thing is lacking in their life. And people who are single parents, in some respects, adopt both roles.
Yeah, sure.
But there are differences between males and females, despite the sort of some of the current ideologies. Yeah. I'm somebody who would say I think men and women are different. And there's a lot of psychological studies and things that talk about senses of self-esteem coming from fathers. And you see in families where a father might be detached or not really invested in the child, that the self-esteem can suffer, that their sense of identity.
Sure.
I think also a father is role modeling what it means to be a man and what it means to be a man, hopefully in a normal marriage or a committed relationship, what it means to be a man in relationship to a woman. What a marriage looks like, how men should behave, how men should treat women. So I have 3 daughters, so I didn't need to teach my kids to be manly, but I didn't treat them like, it wasn't just all dolls and, they're just normal kids, just treat them like kids.
Yeah.
But I wanted them to grow up knowing what they should expect from a relationship with a man.
Yeah, awesome. Beautiful. Now, I want to take you back to those early stages, like you're mentioning, when you first became a dad, and as you first became a family unit and those first few formative years. Are there some key practices or things you learn? Obviously, that we often are found, you learn by error often, and you go, okay, that's not something I want to keep doing, and you start to adjust your behavior or some of the rhythms as a family. Were there some key things you put in place or you found worked really well in those formative years?
Yeah. I mean, it was always important in our household to have kind of rituals and commitments and habits of family life, so rhythms that were always constant. So, for example, again, as a Christian family, we prayed with our kids. That was all they've ever known. Yeah. The kids did chores as they grew up. They contributed to the family household. We had family holidays. We went to church. We went to activities. We'd go and visit an elderly relative. We had just rituals that they grew up with that were just normal. They were just part of normal life.
Yeah.
and that was important. Boundaries was always important, and having a household that wasn't harsh, but where there was safety in the boundaries and the discipline of the rhythms of family life.
Yeah.
And that's even down to things like mealtime was always an important thing for us. And we never had TV on. We didn't have phones. I mean, phones didn't exist when my kids were growing up. But, phones at the table, it was like we would spend time together at mealtime talking about things. That was always really important. Other practices and things were that we always wanted to be approachable. I always wanted my children, no matter what their age, to be able to talk to me about stuff and to talk to my wife about stuff. And that meant being a good listener.
Yeah, it's huge.
And disciplining myself not to overreact or to judge.
It's really good.
But provide commentary, and we had a disciplined household. But I never wanted my kids to be scared of not being able to communicate with me or share with me issues that they had.
I think me and my wife Beck, obviously our 3-year-old is really starting to get into that age where, there are boundaries being pushed and explored, and we are really wrestling with, okay, how do we not create anarchy and let it just go wild, but also how do we not be in that category of harshness where she no longer feels she has safety to express the things she's feeling and be able to share and process all the emotions that she's getting going to preschool and all these different things. And so we're really learning to hold our tongue and not react, because sometimes we get triggered by our own stuff and our own insecurities, our own things. We get triggered, and just being patient and allowing her to feel that safety.
And they learn that. Kids are very astute. They pick up on things and they read things. They'll read verbal cues and non-verbal cues. And I think if you grow up in a loving home where there's physical affection, where there's boundaries, where there's discipline, where you can articulate why you're doing things, that's really helpful. And it was also important for us as we raised our kids for them to have a strong sense of self-esteem and confidence and value. They had a sense of their own kind of value and worth.
Can I stop you there? How did you specifically, were there any things you did intentionally to really try to speak into their value and worth and esteem?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it was articulating things, and it wasn't just necessarily praising when you won the soccer competition or you kicked a goal, but even things like praising effort, I think was something that was good. But I think also that just knowing that they were important, that they would be listened to, that they had a role in the family, and that I gave them time by giving them time and showing you are valuable because I will spend time with you. Because I want to spend time with you. I want to talk with you, and I want to go on holidays with you. And at the mealtime, I'm interested in your world. I want you to tell me about what's going on for you and how you're feeling in that situation. Those things send messages to children. But it was also important at the same time to learn that they're not the center of the universe. That the world does not revolve around them. And I think it's a balance, because you don't want to praise your kids all the time so just think everything should just go my way. I'm the center of the universe. It's not that's not the case. They need to learn that, sometimes things won't go their way. But that's okay. That sometimes they'll be disappointed or sad, and that's okay. So teaching, and I think also that thing about self-esteem relates to resilience too, and walking them through experiences of disappointment and sadness, and showing that you do get through this, you do get through the other side, so that they develop that resilience and that capacity to bounce back and not be shattered by the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune which come their way in life.
Absolutely, yeah. No, I think we're learning too. Giving that space for. And not trying to get them to repress or suppress some of those emotions, but actually you can feel it and get through it and you'll be okay. And I think allowing that space for them to learn and go, you know what, this is sad and that's okay. I do need to cry. This is okay.
Yeah, exactly.
But, and because I think sometimes we try to just keep harmony, right? We just try to, we want everything to be nice and harmonious, but actually life isn't, and things happen and we need to deal with that and realize it isn't. You can feel that and it not be the end of the world at the same time.
No, that's right.
What I'd love to know, because I think what can happen with a lot of parenting and fatherhood specifically is we do have our own stuff, and our own stuff leaks onto our kids, and we sometimes parent in a way or react in a way that we're not proud of or that we didn't mean, and and there can be a lot of guilt that comes with that, and where we kind of beat ourselves up of I shouldn't have done that, or I wish I didn't say that, or I wish I didn't do this. How can we manage that as a parent ourselves, and maybe then make some course corrections where needed?
Yeah, look, I think the first thing is to cut yourself some slack by realising that all parents are amateurs. There's no professional parent. I mean, you can read books and look at websites and have chats and, think you've got it down. But we're all kind of amateurs feeling our way. That's the first thing. Yeah. And to acknowledge that we're human and that we will make mistakes. One of the things that was, I suppose, important for me was to, my wife and I would actually talk about how we're going as parents, how we're going in life. And I think you think about if you're in a sports team, you look at your performance and go, okay, well, how have we gone? What do we need to do to improve? Or how did that play work out? Yeah. Or in business, if you're running a business, you'll kind of reflect on how the business is going. Where do we need to go? And without turning parenting into a sport or a business model. I mean, people have been parenting for millennia without websites and social media and books and stuff like that. They just do it.
Yeah, it's instinct.
But I think evaluating, and there were lots of times where we would reflect upon an experience or something that happened when perhaps we disciplined one of the kids and then kind of had to reflect on that and go, okay, well, was I on the right track there? And I suppose part of that is not being afraid to apologise.
Sure. When
you need to. You don't have to be the great person who's got it right all the time. And there were times where I'd apologise to my kids and say, hey, listen, in this instance, I didn't get it right. And that's okay. And I think that's part of, and that builds a bond of safety and trust, knowing that your kid's not feeling that you're some unassailable, you're up at some unassailable height, that you are a human being. And also, the other thing is I'm a really great supporter of parenting courses. Okay. A lot of people think, you do a parenting course when you're in trouble, when parenting, you're broken, there's a real problem, so I've got to do a course to fix myself up. Yeah. But there are so many courses that actually just, all they do is help you reflect. And I've done one, I've led one, and the same for marriage courses. I think they're terrific because they help you to think about how you're going and to articulate that. And it's just sometimes often in the business of life that we don't have an opportunity to do. Yeah. So that's something that I'm quite keen on and quite supportive of.
Yeah, that's really good advice. I wonder, I think sometimes there's a fear, and I know I've witnessed it a few times, where there's a fear either becoming a parent for the first time or in parenting that we're starting to repeat cycles of how we were parented, or and maybe that our experience was not so favorable or wasn't so positive, or maybe it was okay, but like there were just things that that we've found that we don't want to carry on, but we've found without even realizing subconsciously these things come out that that's just the way it was. I experienced it. How do we, if we recognize there are things we don't want to pass on or we don't want to continue generationally, how do we notice that and shift that?
Well, it is all in the realization. I've met plenty of people who would say, my father or my mother or my parents, they ran a household like this, and I didn't like that part of it, and it could be dad was never home, never saw, he was always busy, he was always going out. And so I vowed that when I have kids, I will have time for them. So often people realize that and can put that into play. I think the more difficult thing is where we're just repeating patterns because that's all we know. And so I think, having the capacity to step back and do that evaluation and actually sort of contemplate, how are we going in this regard in relation to how we spend time together or how we relate to the kids or how we manage situations. Just being aware that, and it's natural that we sort of tend to copy our parents, but often it can also be, I've certainly learned a lot from viewing and looking at other parents and going, I really like the way they do that. They've got a really great relationship and learning things and viewing things and from mates. And often when I was younger, older guys who had older kids and just getting their advice. And I think of one, I always remember one example where early on when my wife Meredith was pregnant with our first child, one of my good mates said to me, he said, listen, here's the thing I got to tell you. He said, if you don't raise your kids, somebody or something else will do it for you.
Yeah, wow.
And I remember thinking, it was quite a simple statement. But I remember thinking, wow, that's really profound and important. I have to be active in this space. I have to think about. It's not something I'm just going to stumble through.
Right.
I have to think about what I'm doing, where I'm going, how I am as a parent. I have to think about that and put that into place, because otherwise, TikTok will do it for me.
Yeah.
And that's bad news.
Exactly. Yeah, that is bad news. We don't want to go there. I wonder, okay, so obviously you're now a dad of adult children.
Yeah.
And so you've gone through that whole, the seasons of change and primary school, high school, adolescence into, uni and beyond, and now they're having kids of their own. How has your role, you mentioned about it earlier about, going from dependence to independence.
Yeah.
But obviously you are still their dad and you have been through their seasons. So how has your role changed and what does it look like now? Because I imagine a lot of our listeners also have adult children. And so what's that relationship look like?
Yeah. Even when the kids were young, I had an awareness that one day there'd be adults and I'd be the old guy in the family, in the distant future of 2023. And I wanted that to be, for our relationship to be positive and open. And so it was something that we worked on from day one. It wasn't like we waited till, when they hit 18, we suddenly changed our parenting.
Sure.
What actually happens is as your kids get older, you are perpetually, as parents, moving into new territory, perpetually heading into uncomfortable spaces where you have to get comfortable. And there's going to be a first time for everything. It was the first time you leave a child alone in the house while you go and put the clothes on the line. There'll be a first time. And then you rush back in and is everything okay?
Right.
There'll be a first time you do that and they go to the shop and you go to the shops. There'll be a first time you let them go to school by themselves or cross a road. And that expands as they get older. So you reach that first time when they go overseas. And that's a big moment when you're waving your child by at the airport and you thought, wow, this is a kind of, now they're totally independent. They're on their own.
Yeah.
They're on a plane and they're in another country on the other side of the planet.
Sure.
What's that going to be like? But I think it's understanding that and in some respects it's difficult because you'll always be their parent. Like my dad is still my dad and he will tell me if he doesn't like my clothes.
Sure.
He will tell me if he doesn't like what music I'm playing. If he walks through the kitchen and music's on, he's still my dad. Like, this music's rubbish,
Yeah.
But I think there is a switch that kind of flicks as they head into those later teenage years. And I mean, it's harder when they're teenagers, but when they're adults, you actually acknowledge that they're adults. And it almost flips where now I seek their advice about things, that they are more knowledgeable about a lot of things that I'm not knowledgeable in, where I will seek their opinion. And I'll say, what do you think about, tell me what you think about this. And so I've learned to value them as functioning adults, not just as tiny versions of myself.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's great. I wonder, because I think, as we mentioned a few times, there are lots of different expressions of fatherhood these days and different contexts that can come out in, and even some people who maybe have never been a biological dad. But there's a real need that I've seen anyway in this generation for fathers. We even see a scripture where it says you've got many teachers, but not many fathers. And I think there is a need and a hunger for fatherhood, and maybe some people have experienced a lack of that, either physically or emotionally. So how, whether we're, whatever season of life we're in as a male role model, how can we be a father figure to maybe we're in places where there's a need for it?
Yeah. I guess it depends also on the age of somebody, who's got a lacking in their life. And it's really about connection. And relationship, and it's got to be invitational. You can't just sort of barge into somebody's life and go, "Oh, I think you need me in your life." So it's not something where you'd even articulate and say, "Would you like me to be your father figure?"
Totally.
But it's about, like, when you're in a community, you might be in Scouts or in a surf club or a church community where you get to know people. And I think having relationships with people and learning about their worlds and letting things flow naturally. And you find, if you're having a coffee with somebody and they're asking your advice, it's not like you suddenly put on a hat that is, I'm your father.
Yeah.
But I've had I've had role models in my life who I've got my dad, he's my dad, but I've had other male role models in my life who've also filled some spaces. And that was just by us sort of spending time together, being relational, letting things kind of flow naturally, because, they might not have a father figure in their life, but they might not want one.
Yeah.
So, you've got to be a little bit careful there. But I think, having an awareness and having relationships and being sensitive to people's lives and letting things flow naturally through conversations. And I've had people who have sought me out for advice or just to spend some time together. And I wouldn't say, I think I'm your father figure. But in some respects, I'm fulfilling some of that role where they have that missing.
Yeah, sure. I wonder, obviously we do have Father's Day coming up this weekend. So if that can be a really challenging time, either as a dad or as as someone without a dad, or maybe you were a dad and you've lost a child. So many different categories of people that this can bring up a lot of emotion. Would you have any advice for people as they navigate through Father's Day? And
look, all these public ceremonies, whether it's Christmas, Mother's Day, Father's Day, all these kinds of things can be really challenging for people because there's so much pressure. Even if you think about the ads on TV and social media, it's kind of this pressure for, everybody's joyous and having fun. And of course, social media is so, it presents such a picture of everybody having such a good time that can really shine a harsh light on your own reflections of yourself if that's painful. Yeah. So I think firstly, it's good to acknowledge that and go, this is a difficult time for me because it's bringing up memories, and it's okay to acknowledge those and to process those feelings. It's also okay to acknowledge that fathers, the ideal of fathers, and perhaps it could be a memory of a father, or it could be perhaps not celebrating a father who was not particularly good in that role, but still acknowledging the role of fatherhood as being something that's worthwhile and good and has a place in our society. And the other thing to realise is that Father's Day is just a fake thing. It was made up 110 years old by 110 years ago by a woman in Washington who had her father was a single dad and he had 6 kids that he'd raised, and she was sitting in the Central Methodist Episcopalian Church and heard a sermon on mothers, and she thought, well, what about dads? So she started. Her name was Sonora Dodd. She started Father's Day, and but then she kind of got disenfranchised from it because it became quite commercial. And of course, in our society, it's all about what are you getting for Father's Day? What are you going to get your dad for Father's Day? Sure. So it's also okay to actually just flick past the whole thing. Go to the beach, go out with friends, go out for a coffee. It's like it's Father's Day, but it's not like some God-ordained thing it's going. It's an invented day. Yeah. It's like having Puppy Dog Day. Well, I don't care. I don't own a dog, so I'm not celebrating Puppy Dog Day. But God bless all the people who have puppies.
Yeah. Oh, that's good advice. That is helpful, I think, to frame it in that light. Yeah. Okay, so we have almost run out of time. I would love to know how people can read your book and get your audiobook. How do they access some of those resources?
It's online. Yeah, you can have a look online. Amazon has the book, and Audible.
So you're going to be a dad.
So you're going to be a dad 25-year anniversary edition, because there's different. I wrote it in the 1990s.
Been slightly updated.
And then it got updated at 10 years. Yep. And there's a different edition for 20 and 25 because things have changed so much. When there was no phones when we first had our kids, so you didn't have. There was no social media, so the whole birth experience was a lot calmer. You didn't have to post stuff from the delivery suite.
Oh gosh, yes.
So it's been massively updated.
Yeah, cool. Well, that's great. Well, thank you so much for your time, Dr. Downey, and we really value your wisdom. And I hope you've enjoyed listening. And we'll see you again here soon at SYD Life.